James Whitaker had lived in the remote Alaskan wilderness for nearly a decade, content with the solitude of his cabin nestled deep in the snow-covered forest. Life out here was harsh, but he had adapted to the rhythm of the wild, learning to coexist with nature rather than fight against it. He knew the rules of survival. Trust your instincts, respect the land, and never underestimate the creatures that called this icy expanse home. One frigid evening, as the wind howled through the trees, James sat by his fireplace, enjoying the warmth after a long day of chopping wood. His German shepherd, Coda, lay at his feet, ears perked slightly at the sounds outside. Something felt off tonight. The usual stillness of the wilderness was replaced by an eerie tension. Then a sound shattered the silence, a scratching at the door. James stiffened. No human lived within 50 miles. A bear wouldn't knock, and wolves didn't beg. Cautiously, he grabbed his rifle and approached the door. Coda growled, low and uncertain, as the scratching continued. With a deep breath, James unlatched the door and pulled it open, prepared for anything, except what he saw. 3 wolves stood before him, their bodies shivering violently, their fur matted with frost. Their yellow eyes, usually fierce and predatory, were filled with something James had never seen before in a wild animal: desperation. They didn't snarl, didn't lunge. Instead, they whimpered, lowering their heads in what looked almost like submission. James had encountered wolves before, but always from a distance. They were majestic, untouchable, and dangerous. Yet, these creatures were different. One of them, a massive black wolf with a scar across its muzzle, took a shaky step forward before collapsing onto the snow. James hesitated. Logic told him to shut the door. This was nature's way. Only the strongest survived. But something deep inside told him that these wolves weren't here to hunt. They were asking for help. Against his better judgment, James knelt beside the fallen wolf. It was barely breathing, its body trembling violently. The other 2 wolves whined, circling nervously as if urging James to do something. "Damn it," he muttered. Carefully, he lifted the massive creature into his arms and carried it inside. The other 2 followed without hesitation. Coda tensed but didn't attack. He too seemed to sense that these wolves were no threat. James placed the black wolf near the fire and grabbed blankets, wrapping the animal in layers to fight off the cold. His hands brushed against its fur, and he realized how emaciated it was. It hadn't eaten in days. He rushed to the kitchen, grabbing what little meat he had, and tossed it toward the 2 standing wolves. They hesitated for only a moment before devouring the food with hungry desperation. Meanwhile, the black wolf stirred, weakly lifting its head. James met its gaze, and in that instant something unspoken passed between them. A silent gratitude, a bond formed not through words but through something more primal. As the night stretched on, James nursed the wolf back to health, feeding it bits of food, ensuring its body temperature rose. The other wolves, a smaller grey one and a white one with piercing blue eyes, stayed close, never leaving their leader's side. Then, as dawn approached, something strange happened. The black wolf, now strong enough to stand, turned toward James. The gratitude in its eyes deepened into something almost human. James felt a shiver run down his spine, and then, before his very eyes, the wolves began to change. Their fur shimmered, their forms twisting, reshaping, until, where once stood 3 wolves, there were now 3 people. James stumbled back, his breath catching in his throat. Before him stood 2 men and a woman, dressed in tattered clothing, their eyes the same piercing shades as their wolf forms. The black wolf, now a tall, powerful man with dark hair and the same scar across his cheek, gave James a weary but grateful nod. "You saved us," he said, his voice deep and rough. James could only stare, his mind reeling. "What?" What the hell are you? The man smiled faintly. A long story, but for now, just know that you've earned the trust of the pack. And with that, James realized his life would never be the same.